Hello, my friends. I am so excited to be back. It has been a few minutes, right? Moving, packing, so much going on in my life. And I couldn't be more excited to come back with this specific person who is going to share about a topic that I am so in love with, because the more I study, the more I delve into it, I see the potential and I see the improvement. Just one thing, I see people coming in from Facebook. If you don't approve StreamYard, I don't know who you are, so I'm not mentioning your name. I'm not being rude, but I just see it as Facebook user. So if you don't want to approve StreamYard, at least write your name and who you are. We are joined today by Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar. And Dr. Tal taught at Harvard University. He is a New York Times bestseller of many amazing books. And he's also the founder of the Happiness Studies Academy. And I've taken classes with him. I've read his books. And I had like those crushes on people that have so much knowledge, and you're just so hoping that our paths are going to cross some way. And something happened that our paths crossed. And I'm going to mention this to everybody, but with Dr. Tal, because I want him to see me being grateful for what he has done to me. So welcome, Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Miriam. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much. And we have a bunch of people joining us. Please say your name if you're not approving StreamYard. And share this. You can do an event, like you can publish this while this is happening so other people can watch it live. I want to say thank you in public. And I want you to understand what happened, like that you didn't see, right? Behind the scenes. We have a friend in common, Matana Jacobs, who is like a soul sister to me, and she had interviewed you, and we started talking a lot about everything that I do. And she said, well, and she knew that I was writing a book, and she said, you need to speak to Dr. Ben-Shahar. He's going to give you an endorsement. And I reached out to you, and you said, well, you need to send me your book. I need to see the book. So I sent you the book, and I was like, oh my God, he's going to read the book. And on the day that I went to meet Paul Cummings, who was writing the foreword to my book, I was staying in a hotel, and I get your email that you read the book and that you will give an endorsement. And I literally did a dance. So you didn't see that, but I was so excited. I was like a kid in a candy store, and so grateful, because it wasn't the endorsement on the book. It wasn't those words on the book. It was those words that you said, yes, I think that what you did, it was a good job. And that meant so much to me. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, I have so much to talk to you, so many questions, and I'm happy that we have people here live. If you have questions, feel free to send them so we can answer them at the end. But I wanted to talk to you about inspiration versus empowerment. I wanted to start with that because I want to set the tone for this hour that we're going to spend together. I think that there are a lot of people that are inspirational, and we listen to them and we get excited about what they say, and then we go home and life goes back to normal. But then there are people that we meet in our lives that empower us and give us tools to do something with it. And I wanted you, from a psychological and a scientific background, to speak about this difference, because I want people to understand that I really want this hour to be an empowering hour.
Yeah, one of the characteristics of self-help books or self-help workshops is that they are inspiring. People come out of them, or people put the book down. They say, today's the first day of the rest of my life. I'm really going to make this change. And yet what we find is that the overwhelming majority of people, the overwhelming majority of graduates from these programs or people who have read these books actually end up going back, reverting to their original state. In other words, no lasting change. The estimate / research shows that about 90% of program graduates are, as you put it, inspired but not empowered. And the interesting question is, what is the difference between that, say 90% and 10%? In other words, what distinguishes those who come out, feeling great and wanting to bring about change, but don't, and those who do? And the main difference between the two is that the group that enjoys lasting change is the group that introduces rituals, habits into their lives. They don't rely just on the inspiration. They don't just rely on their desire to bring about change. They actually introduce habits, recurring behaviors. So say, instead of coming out and saying, I'm going to, get fit and I'm going to exercise, they say Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 a.m., I'm on the treadmill. So they're very specific about it. It's less, perhaps less inspiring than saying, I'm going to transform my life and bring about radical change. That's maybe inspiring, but that's not helpful, and it won't lead to lasting change. The only thing that will lead to lasting change is commitment to actual behavioral change, to rituals, recurring behaviors in our lives.
I so believe in what you're saying, and this is exactly how I managed to change my life. I chose habits that I wanted to introduce, and I stayed accountable even during hard times. Meaning, yes, there are times that it's difficult. If I gave myself every morning half an hour, there are times in our lives that we don't have that half an hour, but then do it in 5 minutes. You can't skip it. You needed to adjust to your lifestyle, but the moment you stop it, it's so hard to come back to it. And those, habitual behaviors keep us on track, because also I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can measure progress with constant behavior. You can't measure progress if it's not constant. If you're on a diet today, 3 days you're not, then you're on a diet, you can't measure, right? If you exercise sometimes, you can't measure the changes, but if it's continuous, you can actually measure the improvement. And as you see the improvement, you feel more empowered to continue and to add new habits. Is that so?
Exactly. So it is self-reinforcing. And let's say you have the option, theoretically, between you want to start meditating. And one option would be to go for a 10-day meditation retreat. The other option is to start meditating 5 minutes a day, but to do it consistently for a month or 6 months or a year. Hands down, I would go for the 5 minutes daily, even though the 10-day retreat is wonderful and powerful, and I certainly recommend it if it's something that you want to do. However, much more important would be to have those small incremental changes that you do regularly, consistently, because as you point out, then you see real progress. Why? Because then you're actually creating new neural pathways. Your brain is actually transformed. The form, the shape of the brain actually changes.
Really?
That's real. Physically, that is real deep change.
Amazing. I'm going to ask you now a completely personal question, just because you mentioned that my husband had 2 strokes in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I keep telling him to sit 5 minutes a day and envision the pathways from his brain clear and functioning. Am I crazy, or is there some science behind this?
Yeah, crazy you're not. Okay. Is there some science behind it? I'm not familiar with science that points to actually visualizing those neural pathways, though there is a lot of science on visualization in general. Let me let me share with you a study. I was just talking about it recently, and most people find this study absolutely fantastic. So they divided people into 3 random groups. One group actually went and worked out on their muscles. So, they worked their biceps with weights. The second group visualized working on their biceps. The third group did nothing. Now, no big surprise, the third group that did nothing, their muscle didn't get stronger over time. Not surprisingly, the group that actually exercised on a regular basis, their muscles got stronger. What was most surprising was that the second group, the group that just visualized themselves lifting weights, strengthening those biceps, actually got stronger. Not to the same degree as the group that actually went to the gym, but their muscle actually got stronger. So visualizing is powerful. And the reason why we find this so fantastic, so unbelievable in a sense, is because, especially in the West, we have created a real schism, a real split between mind and body, when in fact, we're one system, one whole.
It's so fascinating that you just said those 2 words, because on my list of questions, that's exactly the next one. The connection of mind and body. When we're talking about happiness, how it affects our body and our physical health. There's so many books, The Body Keeps the Score and others, that talk about the connection, right, that it affects physically. I remember that I spoke to somebody, and he's a holy person, and he was telling me how certain types of pain, emotional pain, can create specific illnesses. And I don't know if in the science world, this is also like, if there are studies that show that. Yeah. It was a very interesting conversation on how we're getting ourselves sick, physically sick, by our lack of joy, by our lack of happiness, and why aren't we doing the work? Meaning, we all want to be happy. If you do research, right, and you ask people at the end of the day, what do you want from life? I want to have a happy life. I mean, I think that this is something that it's in common between all humans, right? We want to be happy. Why aren't we doing the work to be happy? And here we are doing so much work to be physically healthy, and we're forgetting this major component.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right about this, and let me just share two ideas here. The first is that mind and body, as I mentioned, and as in the East, it's been known for forever. It's a new idea for most of us in the West, but mind and body are one. Here's an example of another study. So they identified people with documented back pain. So these were people who were suffering and struggling with back pain. And once again, randomly divided them into 2 groups. One group went to the back doctor. The second group went to a therapist. The back doctor, looked at their back, x-rayed it, tried to do what's needed in order to get them better. The second group talked about issues that they were having, expressed their difficulties and hardships, talked about their struggles. Those who were in the second group, in the psychology group, more of them got better than those who went to a back doctor. Now, I want to make very clear, sometimes backache is as a result of some physiological anomaly or issue. And no psychologist will be able to help there. However, very often, backache is a result of some psychological issue, usually a suppressed emotion. So we need to take this connection very seriously, because it's real. Now, you talk about how so many people do so much in order to become physically healthier, but they ignore or they don't do as much when it comes to happiness. What we see here is what I've come to call the double standard of change. Double standard of change. What's the double standard? So no one would ever think that if they wanted to become a better tennis player, all they needed to do was get a book and read it, and then they'd become great tennis players, or go to a lecture about tennis, and then suddenly they'll appear and win Wimbledon the next day because they read the book and heard the lecture. No, it doesn't work that way. You want to be a better tennis player, or for that matter, a better pianist, musician. Yeah, you can get the book. Yeah, you can hear the lecture. Yeah, you can learn the theory. But then the most important thing is practicing on the court, on the instrument. When it comes to happiness, though, people think, oh, all I need to do is, read that book, or all I need to know is listen to this lecture or attend this workshop, and then I'll live happily ever after. You won't. Because just as you need work, as you need practice, as you need ongoing, consistent, regular, habitual practice to become a better pianist or a better tennis player, in the same way, you need to practice, persist consistently your psychological work.
I love that. So important and so true. I interviewed a lot of women. I was very curious to meet women who had gone through terrible things in their lives, but considered themselves thrivers. They consider themselves truly happy. And I started coming across all these women in interviewing them. And I realized something about them that I thought it was very important in general, that people don't understand, that people can be happy and sad at the same time, that those two emotions are not separate from each other, and that if you were sad about something that happened, that it's difficult in your life, you don't catastrophize your entire life. Your entire life is not a waste. Your entire life is not doomed. You are not a zero, but you have one part of your life, one situation in your life that it's very difficult right now, but at the same time, there is joy and happiness and reasons to be happy. So you can be happy and sad at the same time if we just allowed ourselves and respected ourselves to be a complete and whole individual and have those two feelings at the same time, that they don't contradict each other. I think that people will realize, people that went through tragedies, are going through adversities right now, that it's not, that they are not a sad person, that they can be happy at the same time. What do you think? I don't know if I explain myself well.
Yeah, I'll even take it a step further, that a happy life is a life that comprises painful emotions as well. Why? Because they're necessary, they're essential, they're part and parcel of every life. One of the most harmful myths concerning happiness is that being happy means being happy all the time. That a happy life is a life devoid of painful emotions. And, as I always remind my students, my children, my clients, and myself, there are only two kinds of people who do not experience painful emotions. Only two kinds of people who don't experience sadness, anger, frustration, envy, fear, anxiety. Two kinds of people: psychopaths and dead people.
Well, so, I didn't expect a psychopath, but interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, so if we are sad at times, if we are angry or anxious, it's actually a good sign. It means we're not psychopaths and we're alive.
And very interesting. I want to bring up this question. Curious to know, the cup is half empty. Has science proven that this may be a genetic component, or is it nurture based on environment?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. It's both nature and nurture. It's both our upbringing and also our genetic makeup. There are people who seemingly are just born with that happy gene. And in fact, there is research on it. And what the research shows, what it points to, is that the pie of happiness, so if we think about happiness as 100%, then on average, 50% is determined by our genes. Now, I'm emphasizing on average. You'll understand in a minute why. 10% of the pie is about external circumstances. Now, genes means our genetic makeup, but also very early experiences. External circumstances means, where we live, weather, how much money we have. These are all external circumstances. That's 10% on average. The remaining 40%, on average, choices. Choices that we have, choices that we make. Now, why am I emphasizing average? Let's take 10% external circumstances. Not a lot, right? But think about a person who right now is living in a war zone. You can be sure that their external circumstances affect them more than 10%. Or think about a woman who's living in a culture where she's oppressed. You can be sure that affects her happiness much more than 10%. But on average, when we have basic freedoms, when we have basic safety, basic needs met, obviously poverty, which is an external circumstance, affects well-being by more than 10%. But once basic needs are met, it's only 10%. With genes as well, 50% on average. There are people whose genes affect their well-being much more than 50%. Either way, either they were born with very, happy genes or optimistic genes, or they were born with genes that predispose them to depression or anxiety. And then it's much more than the 50% average. Now, the interesting part here is, what about choices? Because that's also average. How do we get choices to make more of a difference than the 40% average? And the answer to this is that it happens when we become mindful of our choices. And let me give you an example. So being grateful, being appreciative is a choice, of course, and it contributes to our happiness. Now, if I ask you, Miriam, do you prefer to be appreciative and grateful for all the good things in your life, or do you prefer to take them for granted? Now, it's a rhetorical question. Right. Of course, you want to appreciate the good things in your life. I don't know of one person who would say, no, I'd rather take the good things, the good people in my life for granted. Everyone would say, yeah, of course I want to appreciate. And yet, most people, most of the time, take the good things in their lives for granted. In other words, they have a rhetorical choice where it's obvious, and yet they fail to make that right choice. And this is where mindfulness can help, because if I can become more mindful, more aware of the choices that I have, for example, to be grateful, for example, to sit up straight rather than to slouch, another rhetorical choice, to be kind and generous and to bring positive energy to these are all rhetorical choices. Of course, we want to do them, but we need to be mindful. In other words, we need reminders around these practices. And the reminder can come in the form of a bracelet that we wear. Reminder can come in the form of a screensaver. Reminder can come in the form of a recurring reminder on our smartphone, or another person where we help each other, remind each other to do or to be in a certain way. But reminders are critical for raising awareness so that we become so that we can make better choices, and which will, in sum, affect our happiness by more than 40%.
So I want to take this one step further, because we skipped a little bit about something that I wanted to talk about, and it's right here. So it has to come here. I started working on being grateful for the bad things. And I think that I leveled up. It made a huge difference in my life. That when not grateful for the exact bad thing that happened, but the possibilities that this bad thing could bring. So instead of taking something that happened and I said, well, this is bad, this hurts me, right? Obviously it does. This hurts me. I'm entitled to this pain. This hurts me. But after I spend a minute being sad or crying, I stopped and I said, okay, can we think for a second about the potential of good that this could bring? And it's imagination. I mean, I don't know if those things are going to happen or not, but if I start looking of what it could happen from it, then I can say to myself, well, then this is not as terrible as I thought, because there is something good that could come out of it, and I'm just yet to discover. Do you think that this is like I'm fooling myself, or there is some base?
All right. So let me respond to this with a question, because I'm not quite there where you are, but pretty close, as will soon be clear. So when I was a graduate student, my PhD was a joint PhD in the psychology department and in the business school. So because part of it was in the business school, I was responsible for undergraduates, for students. I was a tutor, helping them navigate the job market. So every year when recruiting season starting or applications went out and resumes were written, I would help the students. And I think it was 2002 or 2003, when the market had really come down relative to the year before, 2 years before. And I spoke to a group of students who were applying for consulting jobs, for investment banking jobs, and so on. I was speaking to them about the new reality. And I said to them, look, 2 years ago, recruiters would come to campus and would give you signing bonus. Just come and work for us, please. And I said, today, the market is tanked. The situation is very different. You will really have to go out of your way to find a job, because these same organizations that paid signing bonuses 2 years ago are now firing employees. It's a new world. It's a different reality. Now, at that time, I was already doing research on positive psychology, the science of happiness. The student, some of the students had been in my sections. And one of them, Shane Fitzcoy, puts his hand up. So I'm speaking, for 20 minutes very passionately about this new reality, new market. And Shane Fitzcoy puts his hand up, and I said, yes. And he says, Tal, you are our happiness teacher. You always talk to us about how important it is to look at the full part of the glass, how about optimism. And yet for the past 20 minutes, you've been talking pessimism nonstop. Help. So everyone, laughs or chuckles, and then there is silence. And I'm about to answer Shane. And I'm about to tell him, Shane, things happen for the best. But before I open my mouth, I realize that I actually don't believe that. So I said to him, Shane, I'll get back to you. So for a few days, I think about this. After 3 days, I see Shane in the dining hall, and I say to him, Shane, I have an answer for you. While I don't believe that things happen for the best, I know that we can choose to make the best of things that happen. While things don't necessarily happen for the best, we can choose to make the best of things that happen. So if that bad thing, as you point out, happens, I can't go as far as being grateful for it, I must say. Mm-hmm. However, it happened. It's a reality. I didn't invite it. But now I have a choice. What do I do with it? And here I can choose to make the best of it. And let me back this up with a study or a couple of studies. So they did research on cancer patients, and they had them write a journal entry on the benefits of their cancer. Not saying that the cancer happened for the best, because most of them would say, I wish that this didn't happen. Most would say that, but it did. And once it happens, there's nothing they can do about the fact that it happened. So you accept it, and as you say, you cry and you experience the experience. But it happened. Given that it happened, what are the benefits of it? And they wrote about it. And what did they write? They wrote things like, I'm so much closer to my family and friends now, or I suddenly realize such, internal strength within me, or I appreciate life so much more so than I did before. So they wrote about the benefits. Now, those who wrote about the benefits were more likely, again, it never guarantees, but they were more likely to heal. Their psychological mood was, in general, significantly better than those who did not focus on those benefits. They found similar findings with trauma survivors. And again, the trauma survivors didn't say, by and large, I'm so grateful it happened for the best that I experienced this abuse or observed this crime or was in this battle. Rarely would they say, "Oh, I'm so glad it happened." But they could still find benefits in what had happened, learning to make the best of a bad situation.
I agree 100%. And this is like exactly what I meant. But at the same time, for example, my daughter is in a PhD program for psychology, and she's a professor, and she was teaching in some smaller colleges, and other colleges that she applied to, she didn't get, but they were also small colleges. Mm-hmm. And so she called me back and she says, I'm disappointed that I'm only teaching in those two places. And I said to her, the fact that you didn't get to that place, I believe it's for the best. I think something amazing is going to happen. There was no way for me to know, right? I said, you don't know what opportunity awaits. So right now it sucks that you didn't get that opportunity, but I don't think that you need to be sad because you don't know what's making it available for you. So now NYU master's program reached out to her and she's teaching a course there. So she calls me back and she said, if I had taken that job, I wouldn't be able to take this opportunity now. So I think that sometimes it's about patience. It's about us discovering. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring us. And if you just leave an open mind, that we don't know everything, that we don't know when something happens to us and can seem bad, it seems bad and it is painful, but it doesn't mean that something better is not going to happen afterwards.
Yes, it doesn't mean, and sometimes that's the case, not always.
Correct. Correct.
Sometimes, bad is bad and it's a given. And then the question is, how can we, mitigate the impact of it, or how can we do the best that we can given the situation? Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that we welcome or that it ultimately worked out for the best. It doesn't always.
So let me ask you, based on research, because I've spoken for so many years with women that went through such hard things. Like some of them, I wrote a blog about what happened to them. Some of them, the stories were so hard that it took me time to even write it. It was so difficult. But when I looked back at these women, they were truly, truly happy. They were so content with their lives. Every small thing that happened to them that was good really made them very happy, not just a little momentarily happy, but they were so grateful that their life had improved so much that they felt, and I don't know if it's scientific, but they felt, to me, a deeper sense of happiness. Has there been a research to compare people that are happy, that are mindful, that they work on their happiness, and then people that overcame difficult things and then they're happy and mindful about their happiness? Is their happiness more deep and extreme than the people that had a life with minor bumps?
Yeah, it's very difficult to talk about minor and major bumps. Why? Because emotions are subjective. And, for one person experiencing a loss of a loved one is obviously going to hurt them deeply. For another person, not getting into a school of their dream may cause the same or very similar amounts of pain. And it's not that one is right and the one is wrong. One is legitimate and the other is illegitimate. Emotions are emotions. What we feel is what we feel. There are some people who experience uh, deeper levels of sadness, and usually these people are also able to experience higher levels of pleasurable emotion. So there is usually symmetry, because people feel, and if you feel strongly up, and you feel strongly down. If you don't feel that strongly, it works both ways. So in this respect, yes, the deeper the downside, the higher the upside.
It's very interesting. It's interesting what you're saying, that also it's how each individual receives it. So maybe they were extremely sad or extremely happy because they're just a person that are able to go to those extremes. Very interesting. I wanted to talk about impulsivity. And this was something that I work on myself, and I see tremendous improvement. And I think that my impulsivity years ago, when I got married, for example, 30 years ago, I was very impulsive. Somebody said something to me that I didn't like, I quickly responded. If something didn't go my way, I threw a tantrum in an adult way, but nevertheless, it was a little bit of an impulsive behavior, and I realized that the reaction to my impulsivity was worse than whatever it is that happened to me.
Mm.
So I started working on controlling my impulsivity and taking breathing, right? Breathe before I respond. Or if somebody wrote something that upset me, read multiple times, put it down, read again, and then respond. Another thing that I started doing is that if I wanted to respond via email, is that I would write the response to myself. And then tomorrow, the next day, I would read what I responded, and I would say, do I still want to respond in this way? And I started implementing those methods to control my nature of immediately responding. And I realized that by doing that, I became happier, because so much of misunderstandings came from that impulsivity, from my character, from my personality. If it was a part of it genetics, part of it learned behavior, part of it, I don't know, I ate too much sugar, but whatever it is. But I was really trying to figure out ways to control it. What do you think about this when it relates to happiness and the power that we have to work on our own personalities and on our characteristics that we don't like, we don't appreciate, or other people complain about, in order to improve our happiness?
Yeah, so it's there are two ways to look at it, or it affects us in impulsivity affects us in two ways, and sometimes they go in opposite directions. So first, what you were describing, the ability to hold our tongue, the ability to hold our pen, so to speak. There's a story about Abraham Lincoln, arguably the greatest president in the history of the United States. And the story is that after he died, they found many letters in his drawer, angry letters that he never sent, because he had this same habit. He didn't have email then, but he would write a letter, and an angry letter, and he would keep it there for a few days. And if after a few days he still felt the same way, then he would send it. Otherwise, it remained in the drawer, and he ended up amassing a large number of those angry letters.
Uh-huh.
So that's obviously helpful, and it's important. And one of my personal heroes, Haim Ginott, who was a child psychologist, he would often and he described his behavior with his children. And again, this is one of the greatest child psychologists in history. And he would say to his children something to the effect of, I'm so angry now with you. I'm so upset that I'm not going to talk. I'll speak to you later. And then he went, out and he did other things. And then when he came back, he would talk to his children about, what they did or what they should have done or shouldn't have done. So he was very aware of this impulsivity, and he used that in the right way, because he didn't just disappear and then the children thought, oh, he's always so calm and collected. He's human. So he said, look, I'm human, and therefore I get angry. And therefore I may say something that I regret. That's why I won't say it now, but I'll be back when I'm calmer. And he gave himself this time. In a relationship, it's so important. And by the way, there's actually research on gender differences here. This is reported by John Gottman, showing that men need more time to cool down than women do. So, both get angry, both, could be impulsive, but, whereas women on average, again, it obviously there are individual differences, but on average, let's say a woman needs to count to 10, while men need to count to, 50 or 500 in order to calm down. So that's obviously important to do. And we get better and better at it, presumably, as we age. Because we've been impulsive enough times, and we saw the detrimental impact thereof, and therefore we learned to, okay, let me slow down, let me take a time out or a time in before I respond. So that's good. On the other hand, there is also a problem when it comes to happiness with over deliberation. With the absence of spontaneity and impulsivity. So the challenge is, how can we, in a sense, have the best of both worlds? Meaning know when to take a break and when to simply act on our impulses, on our immediate and compelling emotions. Easier said than done, and I think we get better and better at it as we age.
Exactly. And I'm laughing because everything that I have written down that I want to ask you, you yourself bring the point within whatever something you're saying. I wanted to talk to you about the difference between men and women, because it was very interesting. I was going to give a lecture somewhere, and it was for women only. And somebody promoted in a group that had men and women. So a man wrote to me very upset. And he said, what do you think, that men don't have problems, that we don't need these types of talks? Like, why aren't you talking? Why can't I come? And it was very sweet. And after that, I started interviewing men, because in the beginning, my research was only with women. And I started noticing that men want to have a place to talk, and they want to talk about happiness, and they want to talk about what hurts and the pains and the feelings, and some of them feel that they don't have, like, it's going to show weakness. It's not that people are not going to take him serious in business or whatever it is. He's not that macho man in the family. And are you noticing that because men feel that they have to be more controlled in their emotions, that this is affecting them more? So tell me about it.
Yeah, very much so. So let me share with you a study which is interesting. So there's research on couples who are married or in a long-term intimate relationship, and what the research clearly shows is that people who are in a long-term committed relationship, on average, again, I'm always emphasizing average because there are, of course, examples that contradict this. But on average, people who are in an intimate long-term relationship are happier than people who are not. So, people who, may be in relationships constantly, but are, serial monogamous or in a number of relationships, are less happy on average than people who are in a committed, intimate relationship. Both men and women are happier. However, one of the genders benefits more from these relationships than the other. men benefit
That's what I
more.
was going to say.
Yeah. So while women, still benefit, men more so. And the interesting question is why? And the answer is quite simple. It actually has to do with your question, which is that women, have their BFF.
Girlfriends.
They have their best friend from elementary school where they talk about issues that they're having and difficulties that they're experiencing, and they express their emotions. Whereas men don't have these opportunities or these outlets, or at least they don't perceive that they have these opportunities. And rather than express, they suppress and they keep these emotions in. And suddenly they get into this intimate, supportive relationship. And for the first time in their lives, perhaps, they're able to open up, to talk to someone whom they trust. So of course their happiness is going to benefit more than the women who already have that best friend. They've been doing this for the past, 20 years. They still benefit, but men benefit more so because of that opportunity. So you're absolutely right that men crave, want, and yet don't always feel like they have the permission to be open about their feelings. And it's very unfortunate, because men need it as much as women, of course, and we all pay a very high price when we suppress rather than express emotions.
So how can we change this? I mean, I think we all have a part in it. We all have a brother, a father, a friend, a son. I think that anybody can be, affect their circle of influence to make it available for everybody equally to be able to open up. I mean, we are in this search for happiness, right? And but we're happier together than we're happier alone. I mean, we're happier if those who surround us are also happier, right? It's contagious. When we're around people who are happy, it feeds us.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're not sick people that don't feel this way, but in general. So I think that we have work to do to, and I felt very bad because when he approached me that way, I felt that, hold on a second, maybe I'm being responsible for not creating that space for them to be able to, to open up and share.
Yeah. So, it is important to create that space and to essentially make it okay not to be okay.
Exactly.
To make it okay not to be okay for women and for men, and to create an open space. What I think was so powerful about Michael Phelps, for example, the swimmer coming out and saying, look, I experienced depression.
Yeah.
And to talk about it openly is to, he achieved two very important objectives. The first is, he said, I may be the, one of the greatest athletes in history, but that doesn't mean I'm happy all the time. I still experience depression. It's a natural human emotion. He didn't say it, but he could have well have said, I'm not a psychopath and I'm alive.
Yes.
That's the first objective. The second objective is saying, look, I'm a man and I'm opening up. And I mean, he is, for so many, the man, Adonis, the role model,
Right.
Strong, powerful, an Olympic gold, the Greek ideal of the man. And I experienced depression. So that was very important in that respect. And the more models we see who open up about their emotions, the better. Change always happens slow, and then very fast. So a few more stories like that, and more managers and leaders and people in authority positions who will open up about their emotions, and then we'll see a society-wide change.
I agree. Many years ago, I gave a lecture, and it was before I was in this world. It was before I was introduced to kintsugi. It was before all my research. And the title was the Secret of Happiness. altruism, kindness. And I spoke about how it changes you when you're doing for others. So I gave that lecture, I did it, I gave it, it was done. I went back into my normal life. Years later, I did this research, I spoke to the women, and 100% of the women that I interviewed took exactly what broke them to bring kindness into the world. So let's say if they were abused, they wrote a book about abuse, they opened a chapter about it, they started a nonprofit, but they dealt with exactly what broke them. So they took exactly what they thought was their end and made it their life's mission. I interviewed a woman who lost a leg when she was 6 years old, and now she has this nonprofit giving prosthetic legs all over the world to impoverished children. I mean, these people did amazing things. Yeah. This woman, she said to me, I am grateful that this happened to me because I've never would have been in this life that I have, and I would have never changed this life. It's not that I want to not have my leg, but I want this life that I have now. Meaning the kindness that she's doing is bringing her what I call true lasting joy. And I always say, if we had a joyometer, right, a machine to measure joy, yeah, we get joy when we buy something new. We get joy from a vacation. We get joy when, we see somebody we haven't seen so long ago. But when we do kindness, that joy, I think, lasts longer. It stays with us more. What say you?
So let me agree and also take issue with one thing.
I love this conversation. I mean, you're taking issue with me. I like it. I'm growing. Go ahead.
So am I. You know, just to go on a bit of a tangent, Ralph Waldo Emerson, the North American philosopher, back in 1840, published an essay on friendship. And he said the following. He said, in a friend, I'm not looking for a mush of concessions, for a person who will agree with everything that I say. Rather, in a friend, I'm looking for a beautiful enemy, a person who will help me in my apprenticeship to the truth. You see the same idea of a beautiful enemy also in the book of Genesis. When God created woman so that she's his help as opposition, ezer kenegdo. So to help as opposition. So all I'm doing is being your beautiful enemy. I
just want to say one little thing, and we have witnesses. You now put yourself in a position that you're my friend. It was your own doing. I'm accepting, but I'm going to come and collect. I'm just saying.
Just saying. Good. I accept.
Good. So go ahead. Put me back in my place.
Yeah. Well, no. So here is what. So kindness is certainly extremely important. What I take issue with is the word altruism. Mm-hmm. You know, the word altruism is a relatively new addition to the English language, and this distinction between altruism and egoism, or between selflessness and selfishness, is unhelpful. And let me explain. So if you go to the dictionary now, or the thesaurus, and you look for synonyms for the word selfishness, what will you find? You will find bad, evil, immoral, self-centered, unkind, and so on. So this is the word for selfish. This is the synonyms for selfish. If you go to selfless, you find generous, kind, altruistic, helpful, moral, and so on. So there's a very clear distinction. One is bad and the other is good. But there's a problem here, because what am I doing when I'm pursuing happiness? I'm pursuing my happiness. I'm being egoistic. I'm being selfish. Now, is that a bad thing? Not at all. First of all, I'm contributing to my happiness. As a result of it, I'm more likely to act kindly and generously toward other people. So it's by focusing on my own good, by being selfish, by being egoistic. I'm actually indirectly promoting goodness and kindness, not just towards myself, towards others in the world. So creating this distinction between one is good and the other is bad, that's unhelpful. I'm not being selfless when I help others. I'm not being altruistic. Altruistic quite literally means the negation of the self. I'm not doing that. But at the same time, I'm not just being selfish and thinking of myself, I'm also thinking about the others. So what we need is an alternative concept that in a sense synthesizes between altruism and egoism, that brings together selfishness and selflessness. And my proposal is the term self-fullness.
Love it.
Now, when I came up with this concept of selffulness, I said, "Wow, I invented a new neologism, a new word." But then I looked it up on Google, and people had invented it before me. But the point remains: being self-full is about taking care of ourselves and taking care of others. And the Dalai Lama said it. He said, giving, generosity that is only based on sacrifice doesn't last. Giving must also feed you. We have the exact same idea in Jewish tradition. Hillel said that we need to be for ourselves and we need to be for others. It's bringing the two together.
Yes, and I think that I agree 100%. It's like the mask, you need to put yourself first and then so you can give it to others, right? You're not going to be anything if you're not taking care of yourself first. But I think that the kindness, when you are feeling good to give, that joy that you have it lasts longer than other external things.
So Miriam, can I share a study with you? It's actually my favorite study in psychology. So they had a group of people come into the lab, and one by one, and they measured their levels of happiness. And they after they measured their levels of happiness, they gave them each one individually a nice sum of money, and they told them, "Go spend this money on yourself. Go buy yourself something." And they did. And they went out and they bought themselves a gadget, or they bought themselves shoes or whatever. They went back to the lab after their shopping spree. And once again, they measured their levels of happiness. What did they find as a result of shopping? Happiness levels went up significantly. So that's good news. Have we found the secret to happiness? Not so quickly, because the following day, they went back to the lab, and once again, they measured their levels of happiness. What did they find after 24 hours? Happiness levels went right back down to where they were before. In other words, it didn't last, or it lasted one day. Second part of the study, they bring in another group of people, one by one. Again, they measure their levels of happiness. Again, they give them the exact same amount of money. And again, they say to them, "Go spend this money." Only this time they say to them, "Go spend it on someone else." Whether you give it a favorite charity, whether you buy homeless people meals, whether you buy your partner shoes, whatever it is, spend it on someone else. And after that spending, they go back to the lab and they measure their levels of happiness. What they find is that the happiness levels go up to the exact same degree as the shopper's happiness levels went up, with one very big difference. The following day, when they go back to the lab, they measure their happiness levels again, and it does go down, but it's still significantly higher than it was a day before. Even after a week, they found the impact of giving. So when you talk about it lasts longer, this is exactly what they find in the research. And by the way, whether it applies to material giving, as in this study, money, or whether it applies to spiritual giving, such as kindness. And and the nice thing about kindness, it's free and it's always accessible. Anne Frank, back in the 1940s, wrote, "You can always give something, even if it is only kindness."
Exactly. And I want you to know something. I told the women that I coach that it's a choice also how we can perceive what we do. I hate putting dishes in the dishwasher. I just don't enjoy that. And I was always annoyed coming to the sink and seeing the dishes and having to put them in the dishwasher. And one day I made a decision, and the decision was simple. It was, this can be an act of kindness. I'm choosing that if I'm doing this, not because I have to do this, not because it's a chore that I need to do, but I'm choosing to do this as an act of kindness for my family. And I completely changed the way I looked at something, that I had to do it anyway, because now it was phrased, and I believed it. I believed that I was doing an act of kindness.
Yeah, no, I love that. This is a form of framing and reframing how we what we do and how we experience what we do, which obviously is a very powerful psychological tool at our disposal.
Exactly. It's 10 o'clock. I am sad. I'm sad to let you go. I don't want to let you go, but you now put yourself in a category of friend. So I'm going to invite you here in front of everybody. Would you come back, let's say in 6 months, so we can continue this conversation?
I'll come back happily.
I am so excited. I want to thank all of you for coming, for staying, for asking questions. I saw we missed a few. We will answer them later after the event, but I just want to say thank you to Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, your wisdom. Please always put me back in place, show me the other way, because that's how I grow. And if this is going to help me and anybody else to feel a little bit happier, to find the tools, to be empowered, right? Let's end how we started. This is not about inspiration. This is about people seeing that there are ways and specific things that they can do, actions that they can take, habits that they can implement that can change their lives for the better. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miriam.
Have a good night, everybody.